She had everything against her: the rain, the mud, and even the judgment. But Naomi wasn't about to let anything stop her from chasing her dream. Subscribe and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? The early morning fog had barely lifted as Naomi rushed down the narrow sidewalk, her heart racing. Today was the day she had worked tirelessly for. Today was her first interview for her dream job. She had dreamed of working at Spark Tech Innovations, one of the most cutting-edge tech companies in the city. But with only a few blocks to go before reaching the subway, fate decided to test her resolve. She noticed a woman in her 70s standing next to her parked car, looking distressed. Naomi immediately recognized Mrs. Harper, her neighbor, who had always been kind and generous. Naomi's heart dropped as she saw Mrs. Harper struggling to stand, her cane caught under the wheel, her eyes wide with panic. Without thinking twice, Naomi rushed over. She threw her bag over her shoulder and helped the elderly woman steady herself. Mrs. Harper was grateful, but clearly shaken, and the rain was only getting worse. Naomi offered to drive her to the nearest coffee shop to get some rest before the storm worsened. But as Naomi glanced at the time on her phone, she saw her train had already left. Naomi's heart sank, but she didn't hesitate. Mrs. Harper, though reluctant to accept help, was in no condition to be left alone in the storm. Naomi escorted her to the coffee shop, helped her settle in with a warm drink, and promised she would catch up with her later. Now drenched, Naomi made her way to the subway station. Her interview was an hour late now. She couldn't afford to be late, not after everything she had done to prepare. With every drop of rain hitting her, she kept her pace, determination in her steps. There was no turning back. Naomi arrived at Spark Tech just as the final elevator doors were closing. She could see the sleek glass doors of the building reflecting her disheveled figure as she entered the lobby. She had always imagined herself in a sharp suit, perfectly poised, her resume pristine and flawless. But now, standing before the polished marble floors and towering glass windows, Naomi's reality felt far from that vision. Her dress was soaked, her hair clung in wet strands, and her shoes, once neat, were now coated with rainwater. A man near the coffee counter took one look at her and smirked, but Naomi didn't flinch. She straightened her shoulders and kept walking. The receptionist raised her eyebrows, clearly surprised by Naomi's appearance. But Naomi simply smiled and gave her name. "I'm here for the interview," Naomi said with unwavering clarity. No excuses, no apologies. Just her name and her purpose. The receptionist's eyes flickered from Naomi's soaked outfit to her computer screen. She handed over a temporary badge with a small nod and pointed to the elevator. Naomi glanced around at the sleek suits and calm faces in the lobby, her confidence growing with every step. As the elevator doors closed behind her, she found herself facing her reflection. Wet, tired, but unbroken. Her eyes were focused. Her path might have been messier than expected, but she had gotten here, and that meant something. She wasn't just another candidate. She was the one who would prove herself, no matter what. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the 20th floor. Naomi took a deep breath and stepped into the conference room, feeling the eyes of the interviewers upon her. But there was no hesitation. She walked toward the table, her steps steady, though she could feel the weight of the judgment in the room. The interviewers, all impeccably dressed, remained silent. Naomi didn't give in to the pressure. She took her seat and placed her resume on the table. The rustling of her wet clothes and the lingering sound of squelching shoes filled the quiet space. She remained composed, her voice calm as she spoke. "I'm Naomi Harris. I know I may not look like everyone else here, but I believe my experiences, my passion for this job, are what matter more than anything else. I've worked hard for this opportunity, and nothing, not the rain, not the setbacks, was going to stop me from being here." The room fell into a brief silence, not uncomfortable, but thoughtful. Naomi didn't wait for a reaction. She simply looked around, meeting the eyes of each interviewer, confident in the story she had shared. There was no perfection in her appearance, no flawless background to boast about, but there was a story, one of perseverance, resilience, and grit. And sometimes those were the stories that mattered most. A few moments passed, and then the CEO, a sharp-eyed woman with a quiet authority, leaned forward. "Tell me, Naomi, what keeps you going when everything falls apart?" she asked. Naomi didn't hesitate. When things fall apart, I don't look at it as failure. I look at it as an opportunity to rebuild, to learn, and to grow. I've had to rebuild my path more than once, and that's made me stronger. The CEO nodded thoughtfully. I think that's what we need here. We need people who know how to build, rebuild, and keep moving forward. The interview went on, but for the first time, Naomi wasn't just answering questions. She was sharing who she was, her journey, her struggles, and her unwavering determination. By the time she left the interview room, something had changed. She didn't know if she had the job, but she knew this. She had made an impression. Her journey wasn't just about qualifications or appearances. It was about her ability to stand tall, even when things weren't perfect. Weeks later, Naomi received the call. Spark Tech wanted her. They saw in her what they needed, someone who understood that resilience was more valuable than polish, that true strength came from the will to continue despite the odds. Her first day at Spark Tech was nothing like she had imagined, but it was perfect in its own way. As Naomi walked into the office, this time in a neat outfit, confident and calm, she smiled at the thought of her first interview, of how she had come into the room wet, tired, and imperfect, but had walked out with everything she needed to begin her next chapter. And so Naomi's journey continued, not defined by the rain or the mud, but by the choices she made, the paths she refused to abandon, and the belief that some storms are worth weathering. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Watch our next video to discover another powerful journey and share this one with someone who needs to hear.